Welcome to Mishna study, Masechet Demai, Perek Zayin, Mishna Dalet. Over here in this Mishnah, we're going to speak about a person who buys wine from the Kutim. So if you remember the Kutim, they were the converts who converted inappropriately and then end up finding that they were worshiping Avodah Zarah. So we treat them like Goyim, we treat them like total non-Jews. Interestingly enough, Bartanura goes and he tries to actually explain this Mishnah that it's speaking about the Kutim pre the Gezerah. I think the way Rambam explains it, it's speaking about post the Gezerah, where you treat them like the rest of the Goyim, and then we'll see how you have to separate Trumot and Ma'asrot. Do you just separate Demai, or do we treat it, like really untithed fruit, like as if you bought it from a Goy? Halokech yain mibena Kutim omer shene lugim shani ati lafrish harehen tiruma. So if a person buys wine from the Kutim, Rambam says this is talking about on Erev Shabbat, and he didn't have a chance to separate the regular Ma'asrot, Trumot Ma'asrot on Shabbat, before Shabbat. So now, what could he do? What could he do now that Shabbat rolled in, right? He has something that he needs to separate Trumot Ma'asrot from. It's Shabbat now. How could he eat this? How could he drink this wine? So first he says 2 log, right? 2 log, Rambam says is 2 log out of 100. So 2%, 2 out of 100 is 2%, that I'm going to be mafrish, right? Meaning that I'm going to leave at the bottom of the glass, right? That 2%, that is tiruma, or the bottom of the barrel, right? That is tiruma. So that's going to go to the Kohen. Remember, the first thing we give is 2% to the Kohen. Va'asara, the next 10, right? The next 10 log is ma'aser, right? That's going to be ma'aser. That goes to Levi. V'tish'a, right? Now 9, right? Because you're left with approximately 90, right? So 10% of the 90 is ma'aser sheni. U'mechel v'shoteh, and he starts and he drinks. Right, he starts and he drinks, and he leaves the end, at the bottom of the barrel. There's 2 log plus the 10 plus the 9, right? So he's leaving, approximately 21 log at the bottom, and then after Shabbat he'll go ahead and distribute it. He'll give the Kohen to the Kohen, the Levi to Levi, and the Ma'aser Sheni he'll take up, redeem it, and eat it in Jerusalem. Right, so that's the way. That's the way we explain this Mishnah. Now, Rambam points out a couple of things. One is, if you remember the order that we give out, right, as we always mention, if it's something that nothing was separated from, right, the order we give out always is 2% to the Kohen, 10% to the Levi, 10% Ma'aser Sheni, right? That's first and foremost. Now, over here, we're not treating it like Demai. Why are we not treating it like Demai? Because it's from the Kutim. So we need to separate everything. Demai, we only would have to separate Tirumat Ma'aser. Over here, we're separating Tiruma, Ma'aser, and Ma'aser Sheni. All right, so we're separating everything. So we're treating this much more Lahuna. That's for one. Secondly, over here, we need to point out, and Rambam points this out, that when we mention these measurements, it's not precise, right? If you think about it, once you take off 2 out of 100 and you give that to the Kohen, right? So you gave that to the Kohen. So now you're left with 98. If you're going to take 10% from 98, our Mishnah calls it 10, but it's really 9.8, right? So our Mishnah is not speaking in its precise measurements, it's rounding it up. And later on, you take, 9, you give it as Ma'aser Sheni. If you're actually taking 10%, from what's left, you're going to end up taking 8.82. Right? It's not going to be 9, it's going to be 8.82. So the Mishnah is using round numbers over here. It's not being, exactly precise, but the halacha is that you should be exactly precise. Lastly, I'll just point out over here that this Mishnah is according to Rabbi Meir. Meaning what? Rabbi Meir says you're allowed to leave it at the bottom, and then what we leave at the bottom will be retroactively, that's what we separated as Tiruma, Ma'aser Rishon, and Ma'aser Sheni. Right? We know retroactively that this is what, when I separate Tiruma, it was actually what's going to be, left on the bottom of the barrel. This is according to the Rabbi Meir, that we say that you could say Berera, even in a deoraita law. But what do? Our halacha and the ikar, the principle by us, is when it comes to deoraita, there is no berera. Only in laws of derabanan is there berera. Over here, our case is deoraita. Right? It's turumot ma'asorot that definitely were not separated. Right? So halacha is not like Rabbi Meir over here. Rather, like Rambam said, when it comes to deoraita, you need to separate it from beforehand, separate all the turumot and ma'asorot from beforehand, and then you could drink.